Hello. So I'm currently in that weird in-between space of filmmaking is always an exercise in delayed gratification where you can work for, in this case, like 2 years on a 15-minute episode, and you just know you're doing all of this work, and at some point you get to release it and be like, and it's done. But right now the sound team's working on it. Brendan's going hard, and I've just kind of been sitting on my hands in this place of like it's basically done, but I can't release it yet. So instead, I've started working on all of the stuff for the subsequent episode. In fact, I've even considered like officially releasing it as just being called the boat episode, just because I think that's funny. But yeah, you saw me put together this shot, I think a couple months ago, kind of the initial layout, and I'm just kind of going through and updating the boat, but I'm doing it in a very particular way. And yeah, if you look at the shot too long, you'll see it all kind of like falls apart. There's bits where he's going behind to the edge of the projection and things like that. But the bones feel pretty solid, and I have everything set up so I can render at about 20 seconds per frame, so I can easily do a preview render of this over lunch, and that kind of shows me the places that I need to update. Because the big problem with this one is I need to have this one consistent model across an entire episode. It needs to work from a lot of different angles, and any update I do in one shot has to propagate through, every other shot. And I've tackled this in a few different ways. In Salad Mug, basically every shot was its own complete setup. Everything's montages. You rarely see the same location twice, so continuity didn't really matter. In A Single Point in Space, all of that entire episode was basically just like one Blender file, all of the interiors, and I just had different checkboxes of collections I would activate or deactivate depending on the different states of the different things in the ship and the different lighting setups, which was a horrible way to do it. And I messed up a lot of renders because I accidentally had the wrong thing toggled and all of that. So finally, this time, most every single shot takes place around this boat, and we filmed it in a fairly smart way. Or maybe not smart, but I've spent the last year and a half wondering, did we shoot ourselves in the foot? Is this going to be so crazy? And it's all coming together way easier than I would have hoped. So all of these shots are also kind of preview things, just to make sure the flow of motion and everything kind of works. Like here, it's weird that he's looking up here, but what the audience sees is coming in from the right, and that's kind of a disconnect, but also, I don't know, that might just kind of be how it works. But you notice this bit of the boat is real, and I just get to kind of line up. You can see I still have to clean up some little masking errors around his head there, but because I don't have to rotoscope or key or anything. I just have people walking around in front of the actual geometry that I want to keep, and then I'm projecting, as I've been doing for the past, a couple years, onto geometry that's lined up with the actual boat. You can see right here, so you just see it where you want to see it, and then I bring in an HDRI, and maybe I'll talk about that later. But yeah, as we were shooting, Nathan Vegda was up on the roof getting 360 multiple exposures basically every time during the day, so I can just line everything up. Look how well this lines up. Isn't that kind of fun? The color looks off, but that's actually because of dynamic range stuff, and I'm eyeballing a bunch of things, but it all works pretty good. And the final step is just bringing in the whole boat. And so that's basically the trick here, and that's the big thing I found for my headspace too, is I was having a very hard time modeling the entire boat at once. So instead, I'm working on every single shot in parallel, and just as I'm working, I'm like, oh, I want to work on this crane a little bit so it looks better in this shot, and that just also happens to be updating that crane in every other shot also. So I'm doing a lot of parallel preview renders and getting a sense of how everything's working, and it's informing a lot of decisions. It's a nice way to work. But yes, how do we get this one boat model to work in every single shot? And that's using some tools I haven't used a lot. I recorded all of this yesterday, but at exactly this point, suddenly there was this weird reverby doubling. The boat itself is just a single blend file. It sounded like that for an hour, and I don't know if you've ever tried to Google weird reverby problem with my microphone, but Google does not help you with that sort of thing anymore, unless you can be a lot more specific, which I can't. So I'm gonna check now. I don't know if it's reverby until I'm done recording. I have to stop it and listen to it back. So I think I'm just gonna keep trying to do that. But yes, so we go into the Slumgullion boat file here, and everything I want to import into other project files with the boat is included here in the Slumgullion folder. All of the other stuff here are just other pieces that I'm kind of holding on to in case I want to use them somewhere. But that's all basic enough, and so we could go into like a new project file and say file link, go to my project folder, Slumgullion, and you just go collection Slumgullion. There we go. And it's linked in exactly how it is in the other project, except it's just one big object. Like, if you expand this, you can't access anything inside of it, which is why I'm finally getting into library overrides, which I love just the concept of, where you go, okay, look, I know that, like, this box is here in the original file, but I want to scoot it over here for this shot. If we select this, go over into the outliner, right-click, library override, we're going to make a new override, and I'm going to say selected and content, which means it's the immediate object, but also I think all of the hierarchy kind of under it. And now suddenly we can select every individual object, and there's still kind of rules to everything. Here, let's turn off the relationship lines. Those are getting a little bit in the way. Yeah. And it's basically how inclined Blender is to let you manipulate that data. For example, just by default, you can grab any armature and animate it, which means anything I think I'm going to be animating quite a bit, I already have rigged up. It already knows what all these pose values are in the original file. It's not worried about that. It'll let you pose these no problem the moment you do a library override. But if you're not using a rig, the objects are still locked by default. I can't move them anywhere. Unless if I go into the hierarchy here, and if you hit period on the numpad, that'll actually find the object you have selected. I use that all the time. It's the same as like in Blender. If you select something, hit period on the numpad, you center on it. You can do the same with like over here in the outliner. And if we right click on this and go library override, make selected, now we can move it around. And you can access that same command with the F3 menu too. So here, let's select these objects here and hit F3, make library override. I've been using this all the time, and now we can just scoot anything wherever we want it. But yeah, there's a few rules to kind of learn, and it mostly just comes down to the fact that it's still just referencing that original data. And so as long as you're not trying to manipulate that original data, Blender isn't going to be too mad. Like if you're still using all this mesh data, you can instance a new version of it, and it goes, okay, yeah, we're still just referencing that original crate, but we're just giving it new location values. That's fine. But if we select this and hit tab to go into edit mode, it goes, we're not going to let you edit the original geometry. But what if you really want to edit the original geometry, which again has been what I'm doing. I'll set up a shot that takes place down here on the deck, and then suddenly all of these quickly modeled elements look really low res, and I go, I just want to give this little bin here a little bit more love and attention so it really holds up in a close-up. Well, that is where I've been using what's probably in my top 3 favorite add-ons. It's the Edit Preferences add-ons, Edit Linked Library add-on, and if you have that activated and select like some object that you're linking in, under the side panel here, Item Edit Linked Library, you can just click this button, and right now it's mad because I haven't actually saved this file yet, and what it's going to do is open up that original file, which would mean I'd be losing this one, so let's save it. Delete me, please, just believe me, you can delete this. I'm never going to believe it. But now if we click this, it'll open up that original file of the boat with the object already selected, so I can, add my additional little gratuitous bevels or something like that. Be like, ooh, and some little, extrusions. Oh, that's some good extrusions, huh? Let's inset and extrude, and inset again, and extrude again. Yeah, now it's good. Oh, wait, it's actually going to save this. Here, just pretend I did all that. But yeah, in that same menu, you can just click Return to Original File, and then look at that, it's all of our beautiful insets and extrudes. Ooh, another benefit, if you look at our delete me please just believe me you can delete a file, it's under 7 megabytes, so it's just like a big JPEG, who cares, as opposed to the original boat file, which is like 1/4 of a gigabyte. And so you're going to be saving a whole bunch of space, along with like not having to go through and update the same. I've had project files where I've had to do that. I update like a model in one shot, like in the taxi scene. Every time I updated the taxi, I had 12 other shots where I had to like copy and paste those updates in, parent them to the taxi, and it was always a big pain in the butt. So yeah, anyways, this isn't anything new, but I'm excited about it. And let's see. Materials are one thing it really doesn't want you messing with. The underlying materials. Like I've got these lights all over, and they have kind of this invisible geometry, so that I can kind of have geometry lights affecting the boat. And if we go under the shader thing, you can see everything is absolutely grayed out. And in fact, this material is a little bit complicated because here, if we're going to the shader editor, I'm actually using a group to power multiple materials here, but we can't, change any of the values in here. They're all grayed out. So in this case, I just make them local. Here, I'm going to hit period, find the object, right-click, library override, make selected in content. Just trust me, it's behind my face. And now that gives us these options. I'm going to click this link icon here, which lets me actually change the values I want to in here, and we can do the same with this node group that's shared amongst everything. But now I can turn on these lights to be whatever I want, which is convenient because I have certain shots where I want the lights to be on or off or whatever. I even have this little thing rigged up, so in theory the light should kind of blink off and on, so I could have that big shot where like all the lights turn on, on the boat. But what this means is because I made this material local, if I ever go back and update something in the original material, in the original file, I don't think those changes would propagate out into anything else, at least not into this shot. And this is a very different video than I did yesterday. Yesterday, I actually made an entire shot. I went from something looking kind of like this to a shot that looks like this. But it was just, again, it was my usual projection thing, which if you've seen my last few videos, I've been doing quite a bit of. And I was like, I can redo it. Let's see, maybe I can think of something. People get upset sometimes when the videos are short, and for me, I'm like, that just means I'm not, bloating it up. I'm making it as efficient as I can. But I think I kind of get it. I've been going out to certain events and like meeting people who watch these videos, and like to get kind of meta, there's an aspect which I didn't appreciate, in that like a lot of these people are the one person from their small town who does CG or kind of filmmaking or whatever, where it's just nice to have somebody talking about something related to your interests if you don't get an opportunity to do that in real life very much. And I feel the same way. Very few of my friends are filmmakers or CG people, at least not the ones who necessarily live around me. So I'm going to try to keep that in mind. I've always kind of not wanted to give much credence to, these are my thoughts on whatever. But maybe I'll start doing a little bit more than that. And also at this point, you've probably noticed I've talked about most of the stuff I do. I keep working on all these boat shots being like, ooh, I should make a tutorial about this. And it's like, that's what my last 2 tutorials have been about. So yeah, maybe we'll just kind of get into what are my thoughts on jazz. But you know what? Let's kind of just speed run it. Gonna go to video editing. No, I'm not. I'm gonna go to VFX motion tracking and load in my shot. Just right here. Gonna make sure I'm sorted by name. Select everything. Open clip. And set scene frames to match the length of the scene to the shot. To make these right here, for some reason, I still have to figure out, like if I do this, if I change this to sRGB, it is in fact linear, which is good. And to make these sequences, I just hop into Resolve here. I've got the clip, I go into the color panel, I add a color space transform node, put in the settings of the color profile I filmed on, which should be pretty easy to find out based off of your camera. I use red color 3 in this guy, and I'm going to convert it to sRGB linear. There we go, and I'm going to turn off tone mapping, and if I want, I can add a corrector after this and turn up the gain, which is just going to make everything a little bit brighter. Yeah, great, and then set the in and out points and export it as an EXR like that, so it'll have a little bit of compression and won't be huge. You'll actually get really good file sizes this way. And just export that sequence. I do that all the time. But yeah, you get something like this, going to increase the pattern size and click on kind of points that I think are fairly trackable here. Might even make the pattern size a little larger and track some of these out of focus points. I was worried about this, but they tracked pretty darn well. We're going to select everything, track forwards. And it took a while to do all of that, so I'm just going to jump into my finished file and still just kind of try to retroactively explain kind of how things went down. Setting the keyframes, you just want 2 different points to demonstrate the movement of the camera real good. So from here to here is about as far as the camera goes from left to right, parallax-wise. So that gives me some good options. You always want to put in your camera settings as much as you can. I know this is the sensor width. I wasn't sure about what the focal length was, but I knew every lens that we had on set, and Blender will actually estimate the focal length. So I told it to just give its best guess here. It guessed 27.69, so I was like, that was probably the 28mm lens, and I just solved it again. and that's a pretty good result. One thing I do a lot more now, you can see this blue line here represents your error. That's how confident it is, or something. It might just be adding up the error of every tracker, you know, together. But things like right here, you see a little bump. This is the relative motion of all the different tracks, so you get this one right here that seems weird. A lot of tracking points do that on the very last frame, especially if they're like going off frame. There's usually one frame here where it kind of like doesn't want to die and it'll just slide. So if we go back here and delete that and resolve, look at that, it smooths that right out. That's great. Tracking is one of those things where nobody gets into it because they want to. It's this kind of necessary evil, and we all just want to kind of figure out how to do it as fast as possible. But the more you learn how powerful it is, the more fun it is to kind of be like, I want to actually get this track nice and clean and good. Next, I'm going to create a camera, give it those same settings as the trackers. The focal length is 28. And the sensor size is 30.72. Under the Constraints tab, we're going to tell it to use that camera solve with the camera solver option here. You can see our tracking points here, and sometimes I would line this up by hand, but let's see if we can actually have the motion tracker do it for us. Let's select this point here, and if we go down under the orientation panel, we can say select set origin, and that snaps it to the middle. We can select this one and say set y-axis, which relative to the origin will snap it like that. And we can also select the three of these and say set floor, which should make everything, yeah, perfectly square. That's great. I may have gone in the wrong order here. If I re-click this one to say set y-axis, that might, yeah, there we go. And that makes it really easy to model some kind of basic geometry to reproject the footage onto. It should just be right down here on the ground. In this case, it's actually kind of weird. Things didn't end up being totally square, and I'm pretty sure that's because the deck of the ship is slanted, so all the water doesn't pool. It'll actually go off at the side, because my walls were kind of slanted in the wrong way. But that's okay. I'm just going to kind of eyeball this one. If you want to be able to see what you're doing under the camera settings, background image, we can load in our sequence. Movie clip, open, select all of these. And I'm going to set it to the front. And you typically want the motion trackers to be kind of perfectly intersected by the plane here. So you know it's right in the middle. So we can probably move this wall back until we get it going through these guys right there. I'm going to pull this down to the intersection of the wall and the overhang. And in cases like this, sometimes it's not totally square. Like you can see this doesn't totally line up. So I'm going to shift right click to set the 3D cursor there. I'm going to set the transform point to the 3D cursor, select the camera, and I'm just going to start rotating this until it looks like things are getting a little bit more square. And a lot of times that means rotating it on one axis, then wiggling it on the other. And yeah, that's feeling a little bit better to me. Maybe add another edge loop that goes to the back of this wall. And this is what I mean. You can see this part isn't totally square either, where I might just straighten that up by doing the exact same thing. Putting the 3D cursor down here in the corner and rotating the camera around that 3D cursor. Great. I didn't used to get the 3D cursor, but it's so nice to be able to make basically anywhere a pivot point if you want to, especially when it comes to the camera. This seam right here is great. On set, I thought, oh, I'm going to have to trace all of these railings and everything. But instead, I just added a little lip to the digital model that I can kind of tuck this under, and the railings and everything are all digital. And so it's I don't even have to worry about it. And then for back walls like this, I think this tracking marker is on the back wall, so we try to make sure that it's lined up with that. These are from the overhang here, so I just duplicate this, extrude it down, extrude it out until it's intersecting this corner piece here, pull it over, and then you just get to decide what you want to keep from the original shot. And it doesn't even need to be 3D or anything. Like in this case, this stuff's just in the background, so all I'm doing is working on a basic mask of mocking up what I want to keep and not. Here, let's turn off the background image, and let's give this the footage material. Going to create a new material, going to set it to emission, make the color an image texture, load in our sequence. Great. If we go to render, you can see it has no idea how to put that on there, but Nathan Vegdahl made us all these cool tools using the money you guys gave us here on the Patreon, so let's use them. So I'm going to select the camera, go down to New Camera Project Node Group, and this does basically what the old UV Project modifier did, except the UV Project modifier just doesn't, here I'll show you. By default, it looks like this, which is not good. What you need to do is you need to add a whole bunch of new geometry to actually clean everything up. And even then, like, the aspect ratio is wrong. And so Nathan's tool is just, hey, way to go, Nathan. Yeah, it's great. So we'll delete the modifier. And once we click the new camera project node group, it's as easy as just adding in the camera project node that it creates. Woo! And now as you scroll through, you can see it's actually stuck pretty darn well to the geometry. The things we didn't model, like this box, or like the ladder sticking out, the parallax is wrong, but everything that's actually supposed to be mounted is pretty good. This is also a way to tell if you actually have things lined up, because if they are, they shouldn't slide around much as you're scrubbing around. I did this one sloppy, but this is one I spend a bit more time on, and you can see it's pretty darn locked. Again, it only needs to be as good as it needs to be for the shot. Also, by default, it'll just keep repeating, which looks kind of weird. And so if you change it from repeat to clip and use the alpha channel to control the mix between a transparent and the emissive shader, you can have it so that there's only footage where there's actually supposed to be footage, which can be kind of nice. Okay, so we should be looking at something kind of like this. I got ahead of myself. There shouldn't actually be an HDRI in there yet. But let's bring in the boat. So I'm going to do what we already talked about. File, link. Find our project file, go collection, Slumgullion, link that in. And there we go, that's huge, it's great. And right off the bat, I'm gonna click on it and go library override, make selected and content, which should give us access to all of our rigs and everything. I actually, because it makes rigs so easy to manipulate, I have every random loose object parented to a secret bone down here inside the model. Look at that, it's this big old bone. So I'm gonna bring the boat over to about so it lines up with the footage. I know that the base of the footage is flat, and so I'm gonna try to line that up with the deck first. Just raise the boat up until it almost intersects the footage here, and then scoot it over so that the edge of the footage is kind of under that lip of the geometry. And I know I modeled the boat at a scale I'm happy with, which means the footage is probably what's off scale. So I'm going to, since I already have this part lined up, shift right click to set the 3D cursor there. I'm going to select the camera and the footage, and I can scale away from this until basically this seems as if it's fitting. So I'm worried about this back wall here. I want basically the point where it starts to snap into that. Yeah, that looks good. And then hopefully that more or less lines up with this stuff over here too. I might have to kind of cheat things a little bit, but that's okay. Here we pull that like that, raise it up a little bit. And if we go to the camera point of view, that's already feeling better than it has any right to, really. Now, obviously it's weird that there's the CG wall in front of the footage, but that's what the hierarchy overrides are for. So I'm going to select every object that's kind of getting in my way here. And hit F3, make library override, and I can just slide them wherever I want. So they're getting out of the way now. Here we can do the same with these pieces. Next, let's see. I'm going to try to just turn the light way down so we can start introducing some lights back in. It looks like there's a really good light back here. Like, oh, here, let's get rid of this guy too. That's adding this bit of light. So let's create our point light. Gonna stick it to somewhere in the middle here. For the color, I'm just gonna sample the light hitting this white wall here because that's probably about right. So if I grab this, alt drag on this bit, we get this kind of greenish beige. Turn the value all the way up and the brightness up, and it should just kind of match okay. One thing I want to do is make sure that the light on the railings kind of matches the floor, and I can just move it on the y-axis until that seems to kind of line up. And I could do the same, you know, by matching the footage here, but I don't really think it matters on that axis. I can turn up the radius if I want to soften it, and then turn it down until these things match a little bit. Honestly, I'm trying to sculpt the light a little bit. I want it to feel like there's this little glowing thing, and then all the light is being cast up against the rest of the ship. I want it to feel kind of creepy like this. In fact, looking at this now, just these dark shadows right there, in the shot I did yesterday, remember it's kind of a pain to make these lights local, but we go library override, make selected in content, click this link, click this link, and then turn the value to wherever you want. I think this kind of muddies everything up a little bit. I think maybe that could be part of the shot. Like, as they poke their heads out, you see the lights suddenly go, you know, as if they're kind of trying to shut down because they're in this dangerous situation. Ooh, I like that. Also, it's not going to affect much, but let's shift right click here, add a little light, bring it out a little bit so it lines up with this one. And it's just going to hit this railing a little bit, and that's all it's going to do. But here we can sample the wall. It's never a bad idea to try to get as much interactive lighting as possible. Yeah, that feels better. And I want them to be looking out, you know, through this massive cranes where they're seeing something that's kind of obscured. And I want the audience to be looking too, like, what is that thing? So I can pose this crane rig here, median point, pull it out. I can even kind of cheat stuff around if I want to really obscure things. In fact, I'm trying to kind of go out of my way to never clearly show the layout of the boat, which gives me a lot of opportunities to cheat things. So I can take this crane from this other side of the boat and stick it back here too, so we can just get, you know, a big mass of different things sticking out. In fact, I want to model one more big one that's kind of just a big, boring square crane. And that'll also help me hide this engine back here, which I was never really all that fond of. And we could load it in an HDRI. Nathan made us an HDRI generator. It's part of the Colorama tools, or is it called Colorama? I'll link to them below. Yeah, Nathan got so many different scans of all the different locations before and after we were shooting. It's cool. And for the sky, he just went up basically every hour or hour and a half and grabbed different HDRIs that matched the sun moving over. So it was the same kind of sunlight pattern every day. So I basically have every time of day here. I think like this is 5 p.m. in November. I can just drag these into his HDRI merge program and build HDRI. It estimates the transform function and looks at the ISO data, and how cool is that? There we go, and we can change the exposure, and we have all these different things in there. I'm gonna save it. 7 p.m. Great. Under the world settings, I'm gonna change it from RGB to environment texture. Load that in. There we go. And in the shader editor, if we go under the world settings, we can see there's our HDRI automatically set up. I'm going to hit Control T, which gives us the mapping nodes here, and I can just rotate it on the Z-axis until it more or less lines up with the way it actually was on the day. Something like that. It doesn't look the same, one, because it's higher, so you can see this billboard here, and you can also see we're on the roof of the ship. But if we grab a random plane from back here and kind of scale it up, we can see this is maybe too bright, so I'm going to turn the HDRI down to maybe like 0.25. Yeah, that's probably good. And then if we want to, we can put a little bit of volumetric haze in here. I'm just going to create a big cube that goes off into the distance a little bit. I like to keep it kind of shorter as if it's a low-hanging fog, and that also means it's easier. Light doesn't get trapped bouncing around, you know, and up in areas where it's not going to affect anything. But in the shader editor here, I'm going to give it a new material, delete the default principled, create a volume scatter, drag that into the volume. By default, it's going to be, ooh, very dense. Look at that. I can hear the foghorns. That's great. 0.02 maybe, and look at that. Yeah, now we get, I like how that feels. I actually like this version more than the other. It's always interesting. I was looking at the final shot I made yesterday being like, I just don't like this, and it's because these lights up here were just muddying everything up. It was looking too, although even this, I don't know. I'm also just a sucker for haze. Another thing we can do is here, I'm going to shift right click, set the 3D cursor right here on the footage, create a little empty there, and turn on auto keyframing. Is I'm just going to put this sphere wherever the focus is on the footage. So yeah, it's here. Now it looks like it's back there in kind of the middle of this space. And this is actually going to be a little bit weird. This is the one shot. We had a really good guy. His name was Addon. It's my first time ever getting to shoot with an actual like focus puller. He was incredible. He was locked on every single time. But by the time we got to the end of this day, I was having like, I just shoot entire scenes in like 20 minutes. And we were doing like, it was a full actual production of like all the people doing things and everybody's grumpy, but I'm like, so this is the one night where it's like we gotta kind of just go. And so I'm just yelling behind the camera like, look over there's a robot. Oh yeah, let's focus on it and like come back. And everybody's like, what's going on? And I'm like, I'll fix it in post, sorry. If you've ever been an on-set supervisor, it's always kind of a bummer being Mr. CG on set because nobody has any idea if you're full of shit or not. And so you're like, oh, don't worry about it. And they're like, do you know if you know what you're talking about? And then it takes like 2 years before you can come back and be like, I did. Look, it wasn't a problem. And sometimes it is a problem. And it's actually, I always think it's very funny talking to clients, trying to explain like the things that are so easy and so hard. Because I get from their position, a lot of times it sounds very, very arbitrary, where it's like, oh no, like fixing their haircut, that would be very, very hard. But like fixing the angle of a picture in the background of like a locked off shot is the easiest thing in the world. Okay, so this empty basically matches the focus. And then we go to our camera here, and come on, camera. And we go down to depth of field settings, and we can select that empty in the background. And usually you have to tweak the f-stop a little bit. Smaller numbers are blurrier than bigger numbers. But now the depth of field of the digital set should mostly match the depth of field of the footage. Unfortunately, because the footage is there in the 3D scene too as a video texture, we're adding a double depth of field onto everything. Like, it's already been blurred in the camera, and now it's being blurred by our digital camera. So I did something that I think I'm going to do a little bit more. And that is, here, if we find this footage here in the outliner, and turn on the mask toggle here, if we click this, this just renders it as alpha 0. And here, if we go down under our render settings and check film transparent, which means we can literally just render this as an EXR sequence with an alpha channel and drop this over the original footage in the timeline, and it all just worked really, really good. It's kind of weird, you know, you've got the haze showing up as like that's the only thing there in the alpha channel, but that's how it would be in the actual scene anyways. There's a little bit of haze being added there, which means I should probably model these boxes and make sure everything's lined up. This is the quick and dirty version, but you get the idea. But yeah, then I just draw the rest of the owl. I've got some big cement pieces I've been using. I've got some water stuff and distant factories. And now I can just add my big, creepy robot flying around here. These are its evil hands. And I'm finding myself frustrated right now just because this shot works intrinsically better than the one I spent far longer on yesterday. But I guess that's how it goes when you're redoing stuff that you did. It's just something about the lighting here feels, it's a gradient of like radius of, you know, close, dimmer, dimmest, with like a nice silhouette here, and then this is the area for like the creepy stuff to play, and it just compositionally works a lot better. And yeah, I guess this is spoilers, but I've been trying to figure out the killer robot design, and I kind of like the idea of giant microwave dish sensor type arrays that look like just the eyes of a deep sea fish, kind of that dull, milky, kind of Gollum-esque eyeball thing. I don't know if this is exactly it. I want it to look like it's a tractor. So my thought was, that I was pretty proud of, I was trying to think like, I want it to look creepy, but it always bugs me in sci-fi movies where somebody's like, and this is our new robot police force, and the audience is watching like, oh, I'm sure nothing will go wrong. But the robots are designed to be like, you know, creepy, evil looking robot. They designed it to be the evil robot, not the police robot. And so I wanted it to look industrial. So I thought, okay, what if you took like a tractor, but you took off all the cowling, all of the outer sheet metal, so all you have are the inner struts, so it looks a little bit like a skeleton or something. And so this was me just playing around last night. It doesn't look that great, but it's enough to kind of let me start playing around, you know. These are all just photo scans I think I've already released from the like agriculture museum out in Eastern Washington. But yeah, okay, now I don't feel so bad about the video being too short. I've got all of these high concept videos that I've been working on. But again, like I'll go on field trips and I'll go off into the mountains and be like, hello, this is me talking about this. But it turns out, I don't know, I get out to the mountains and it's raining and I'm sitting there in the rain trying to make a video and I'm like, this isn't it. I'm not great at this, but yeah. Anyways, thanks for hanging out. In theory, the next episode, basically it's the direct sequel to Salad Mug, is coming out in like any day now. Well, it's still going to be a little bit while. Andre Deduce, very talented Blender artist and just artist in general, wrote the album, and he lives in Paris, and he was like, hey, I'm talking with some people in Paris who want to release like a vinyl of the Dynamo soundtrack that he wrote. And I'm like, what, a French vinyl album of Dynamo? That sounds so cool. But they want like a little bit of time to be able to amp up to their release of that, and so I might be holding off on releasing the episode a little bit to coincide with them releasing that album. Okay, and it's getting late, but I did a little preview render here. I like adding this moment because originally he looked away, and I was like, why is he looking away when there's a big robot there? But now it's like, it doesn't pop out until after, and I think that's going to work really good. Still have to work on some timing, and this is obviously the preview render. There's a lot of grain and stuff in there, but I think this is a good reveal. I like, again, any moment where the audience is there with the characters being like, what is this thing? So I want to dial that in. I want it to be just this weird shape of like silhouettes kind of hidden by other stuff. But now, yes, I'm gonna see if I can edit all this into something watchable and go to sleep, because my sleep schedule is absolute bananas. I did the thing where I woke up early. Never mind. My sleep schedule, it's just always a mess. Okay, goodbye.